When the hiring manager leaned across the table and said, "We like to see candidates prove their commitment before we make offers," I should have walked out. But I was desperate. I needed this job. What I didn't know was that the 9 red flags I'd already counted were just the beginning, and what she asked me to do next would make me question everything I thought I knew about interviewing. Let me take you back to 3 weeks ago. I'd been job hunting for 4 months after my previous company went through a brutal round of layoffs. I was one of the unlucky 40% who got the top on the shoulder and the cardboard box. So when I got a call from a recruiter about a senior marketing manager position at a company I'll call Pinnacle Solutions, I was cautiously optimistic. The salary range was solid, the job description matched my experience perfectly, and honestly, I was running out of savings. Red flag number 1 appeared before I even set foot in the building. The recruiter scheduled my interview for 7:30 in the morning. Not 8, not 9, 7:30. When I asked if there was any flexibility, she laughed and said, "Our CEO believes early birds catch the best talent. Everyone interviews before 8. I told myself it was fine. Maybe they were just morning people. I arrived at 7:15, dressed in my best suit, portfolio in hand, ready to impress. The office was one of those sleek downtown high-rises, all glass and steel. But when I walked into the lobby, I noticed something strange. Red flag number 2. There was no receptionist, no front desk person, just a printed sign taped to a pillar that read, "Interview candidates, wait here. Someone will collect you eventually." Eventually. I stood there for 23 minutes. I know because I watched every single one tick by on my phone. Other employees walked past me, some giving me curious looks, others completely ignoring my existence. Not one person asked if I needed help. Finally, a woman in her 40s with sharp features and an even sharper blazer approached me. "You must be Marcus. I'm Diana, Director of Marketing. Follow me." No apology for the wait, no handshake. She just turned and expected me to follow. We walked through the open office, and that's when I spotted red flag number 3. Every single desk had a small digital timer on it, green numbers counting down. As I watched, one timer hit 0 and a loud buzzer sounded. The employee at that desk, a young woman who couldn't have been older than 25, physically flinched, then started typing faster. "Productivity trackers," Diana said without breaking stride, as if reading my mind. "They reset every 45 minutes, keeps everyone focused." I felt my stomach tighten, but I kept walking. The conference room she led me to was windowless with harsh fluorescent lighting that buzzed overhead. There were 3 other people already seated at the table, and not one of them smiled when I entered. Red flag number 4, the panel. Diana introduced them rapid fire. There was Gerald from HR, a thin man with glasses who looked like he hadn't slept in a week. Priya from finance, who was already reviewing what I assumed was my resume with a red pen in hand. And finally, someone Diana introduced only as the observer. I asked the observer what their role was. "I observe," they said. That was it. No name, no department, just observation. Red flag number 5 came within the first 3 minutes of questioning. Gerald leaned forward and asked, "On a scale of 1 to 10, how comfortable are you working 70-hour weeks during our peak seasons?" "How long do peak seasons typically last?" I asked. He exchanged a look with Diana. "It varies, sometimes 8 months, sometimes 10. I did the math. That was essentially the entire year with maybe 2 months of normal hours. But I needed this job, so I said, "I'm no stranger to putting in extra effort when it's needed." Gerald made a note. I couldn't tell if it was good or bad. Red flag number 6 was Priya's first question. "I see you were at your last company for 4 years. Why so short?" 4 years? She called 4 years short? I explained the layoffs, the restructuring, how it wasn't performance-related. She made a small humming sound and circled something on my resume. "We prefer candidates with longer tenure commitments. Our last marketing manager was here for 11 years. We consider anything under 7 years to be job hopping." I wanted to ask if they expected me to sign my life away, but I bit my tongue. The questions continued for another hour. Some were normal, tell me about a campaign you're proud of, describe your management style, but others were bizarre. Diana asked me what my parents did for a living. Gerald wanted to know my credit score. Priya asked if I was planning to have children in the next 5 years. Red flag number 7, The illegal questions. I dodged them as professionally as I could, giving vague answers while internally screaming, but I kept thinking about my dwindling savings account, my upcoming rent payment, the interviews that went nowhere. Then came red flag number 8. Diana slid a piece of paper across the table. Before we continue, we need you to sign this. It was a non-disclosure agreement. For the interview. Standard procedure, she said when she saw my hesitation. We discuss proprietary information during our hiring process. We need to ensure candidates don't share what they learn with competitors. I read it carefully. The NDA was broad, almost impossibly broad. It prohibited me from discussing anything about Pinnacle Solutions, including the interview itself, for 5 years. Violation could result in legal action. I signed it. I know. But at that moment, I just wanted to get through the process. The observer hadn't said a word since their one-line introduction. They just sat there, watching, occasionally making notes on a tablet I couldn't see. It was deeply unsettling. After 90 minutes, Diana finally smiled for the first time. Marcus, I have to say, you've impressed us. Your experience is exactly what we're looking for, and you've handled some of our tougher questions with grace. Relief flooded through me. Maybe I'd misjudged this place. Maybe all the weirdness was just corporate eccentricity. However, she continued, and my stomach dropped, we have one final step in our hiring process. She slid another piece of paper across the table. This one made my blood run cold. Red flag number 9, the one that should have made me run. We require all final round candidates to complete a 2-week working interview. Unpaid, of course. You'd come in during normal business hours, work alongside the team, and we'd evaluate your fit in a real-world environment. Okay, I need to stop right here because my head was spinning at this point. 2 weeks? Unpaid. After everything I'd already seen? Subscribe if you think what they were asking was absolutely insane, because I swear I'm still not sure I processed it correctly in the moment. Drop a comment telling me what you would have said, because what came out of my mouth next, I still can't believe I said it. Keep watching. I stared at that paper for what felt like an eternity. The observer was watching me, of course they were, that was literally their job, and I could feel everyone's eyes boring into me. My logical brain was screaming, walk away, this is exploitation, this is potentially illegal, walk away. But my desperate brain, the one that had been staring at rejection emails for 4 months, whispered, maybe this is just how they do things. Maybe it'll lead to something real. I took a deep breath and asked, is this paid as a contractor rate or... Diana's smile never wavered. As I mentioned, it's unpaid. Think of it as an extended interview, an opportunity to prove yourself. That's 2 weeks of full-time work, I said slowly. 80 hours. Closer to 100, actually, Gerald chimed in. Our standard weeks are 50 hours minimum. I looked around the table. Priya was still marking up my resume. The observer was typing something. Gerald was watching me like I was a bug under a microscope. And something inside me finally snapped. Let me make sure I understand, I said, keeping my voice calm. You want me to work 100 hours for free after I've already signed an NDA that prevents me from even talking about this experience, and there's no guarantee of a job at the end? That's correct, though candidates who complete the trial period have a very high success rate. What percentage? She hesitated. That information is confidential. I laughed. I couldn't help it. It just came out. Is something funny? Gerald asked, his voice sharp. No, I said, shaking my head. Actually, yes, this entire thing is funny, in a dystopian, absurdist kind of way. The observer stopped typing. Marcus, I hope you're not about to sabotage this opportunity. Opportunity? I stood up and it felt like releasing a pressure valve. Ma'am, I counted 9 red flags in the past 2 hours. 9. And that's not including the illegal questions about my family planning, my parents' occupations, or my credit score. Gerald's face went pale. We never asked about... You absolutely did, and I have a very good memory. I topped my temple. The NDA I signed prevents me from discussing proprietary business information. It does not prevent me from discussing potential labor law violations. The room went very, very quiet. Diana leans back in her chair. Are you threatening us? I'm informing you. There's a difference. Now let me tell you what's going to happen. I'm going to walk out of here, you're going to pretend this conversation never happened, and you're going to stop asking candidates to work for free because what you're describing is called wage theft and it's illegal in all 50 states. I picked up my portfolio and headed for the door, but before I left, I turned back. One more thing. Those productivity timers on everyone's desks, that buzzer that made that woman flinch, that's not productivity, that's psychological torture. Your turnover rate must be astronomical. Diana stood up. How dare you? I dare because someone should. Good luck filling this position. You're going to need it. I walked out of that conference room, past the desks with their horrible timers, past the lobby with its insulting sign, and out into the morning air. It was 8:45. The interview had lasted over 2 hours, and I had nothing to show for it, except a story and a burning sense of injustice. But here's where it gets interesting. Remember that NDA I signed? I read it carefully at the time, but I went home and read it again, and I found something they clearly hadn't anticipated. The NDA specifically covered proprietary business information, trade secrets, and competitive strategies discussed during the interview process. It said nothing about general practices, working conditions, or policy requirements. So I did what any reasonable person in 2024 would do. I left a detailed, factual review on Glassdoor. I posted about my experience on LinkedIn, carefully avoiding anything that could be considered proprietary. And I reported the company to my state's Department of Labor for wage theft related to their unpaid working interview. The response was overwhelming. Within 48 hours, my LinkedIn post had over 2,000 reactions. Former Pinnacle employees started coming out of the woodwork, sharing their own horror stories. Apparently, those productivity timers were just the tip of the iceberg. There were stories about mandatory weekend retreats that weren't optional at all, employees being docked pay for bathroom breaks that lasted longer than 3 minutes, a manager who once made the entire team stay until midnight to redo a presentation because he didn't like the font. The Department of Labor opened an investigation. I got a call from an investigator 3 days after I filed my complaint. Turns out I wasn't the first person to report them. I was the 7th, but I was the first one who had documentation of the unpaid working interview policy in writing. 2 weeks later, Pinnacle Solutions quietly removed the 2-week trial requirement from their hiring process. I know because a contact at a recruiting firm told me they sent out an updated job description. And here's the best part. 3 weeks after that nightmare interview, I got a call from a company I'd applied to months ago. They apologized for the delay, they'd been restructuring their hiring process, and my application got lost in the shuffle. Could I come in for an interview? I said yes. This interview was everything Pinnacle wasn't. It started at 9:30, a reasonable hour. The receptionist greeted me by name. The hiring manager apologized for keeping me waiting 4 minutes. 4 minutes. They asked me about my skills, my goals, my approach to leadership. Not my credit score, not my parents' jobs, not my reproductive plans. At the end, they told me about their benefits, real benefits, unlimited PTO that people actually used, mental health days, a strict no emails after 6 policy. I got the offer a week later. It was 15% more than Pinnacle had posted, with better benefits and an actual human workplace culture. I start next Monday. Looking back, I'm grateful for that nightmare interview. Not because it was pleasant, it was genuinely one of the most surreal professional experiences of my life, but because it reminded me that desperation is not a reason to accept abuse. Those 9 red flags were screaming at me to run, and when I finally listened, everything changed. If you're out there job hunting and something feels wrong in an interview, trust that feeling. A company that treats candidates badly will treat employees worse. You deserve better than timed bathroom breaks and unpaid labor tests. And if you ever find yourself in a conference room with an unnamed observer watching you squirm, run. Just run. Thank you so much for sticking with me through this one. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss any future workplace nightmare stories. And if you've ever experienced your own red flag interview, the kind that made you want to run for the hills, I want to hear about it. Drop your story in the comments or send it to us directly. Your experience could be featured in the next video. Until then, trust your gut, know your worth, and never work for free.